wasn't particularly funny.
It wasn't, yeah. It sent off the wrong message about what the show was going to be about too early in the show.
Too leggy.
Too revealing, too early,
Yeah.
or it's just a confusing signal, I think.
Had we all been falling in the aisles, I'm sure it would have stayed.
Right, that's true.
Nothing to do. It slows the whole thing down. It has nothing to do. But we weren't going to have Mother because you needed a clear
Well, first of all,
costume.
that's funny.
But that's a whole page.
But that's funny. You don't mind that. That's funny. You enjoy that.
Well,
and
I
that
know
also
that.
sets her up better.
I
think she pays
happen
off
to like
later.
it, but all I'm saying is if the first...
And I'm saying if we could get that first scene down to a half page.
Well, look,
Ken was a great collaborator. There's a strange, odd combination with Ken. It's a mixture of vulnerability, naivete, and the savviness of a fox because of his law background. And they're all working all at the same time. But he's extremely smart, he's extremely clever, and I thought adapted to the situation remarkably well. But we're in conflict here because this is where it's becoming clear that we have to find much more for Carol to do, and we have to start, opening it up and probably changing the play to a certain extent in terms of the character of Charlotte. And it was just obvious that that's what an audience wants, and you can't go back from that. I sympathized with Ken. I knew what he was going through because he was now watching something that he had in mind start to have to change in a major way.
Thinking back about what happened, it may be that, if anything, Tom and I were less worried about it than the producers per se, because I think we always knew we could solve this. And I think we did. I don't think anybody came into that theater and left the play saying, oh, we didn't see enough of Carol.
I told you not to lift me.
I was carrying you to the throne of Hymen. I was being romantic. No wonder they didn't want me for the movie.
I'm a huge fan of actors. An actor is the one that has to go out there and expose himself or herself. We, as directors, writers, we can always hide behind what we are in our heads. But somebody's got to be out there saying this works, this doesn't work. The director has to be in the middle and at the same time try to incorporate what the actors want. If I have I'm sure I have many flaws, and no doubt you see many of them in the film. But if I had to look to one in particular, I would say that often with stars, I forget the amount of hand-holding that's necessary. And one of the things, of course, about Carol, she's an unbelievable woman and nice woman, and she's a trooper, and she likes to be not treated as a star, but as one of the gang. But as Rocco said, she may say she wants to be treated as one of the gang, but I've never known a star ever who didn't want special attention, and I think I underestimated that.
I even tried it. Did you notice, or did it make any difference? Doing scenes.
I was certainly aware of the conflicts that went on.
In fact, there were many more that you all didn't catch, but yes.
Yeah, this minimizes them, if anything.
I mean, this is the pact you make with the devil in the modern theater. In a sense, you say, well, you need a star to sell tickets.
We knew that going in.
If you set her free, suddenly she's going to find all that energy that she's been pent up. She's really scared of being a parodist.
I agree.
Well, this was where you missed me saying I was going to kneecap them if they didn't stop talking because you all were shooting this scene.
We did this.
I'm aware of that, actually.
Of course, that's what she's been told from the beginning.
No, but that's not the point. The point is it'll never be the play I wrote because you can't do it.
That's always, but
We might
I was surprised when I saw that scene because, I thought they liked me. I had no idea when they asked me to do the play that they were worried about my ability to come through.
Collaboration, but every now and then it's like you didn't quite see that an actor needs it. I kept trying to say, I don't think you see what this is doing for a character. Do you know what I mean? She's allowing her, it allows her to get started.
Right, there she is. There's our star. She hasn't found the role yet. She's not confident. She doesn't know that eventually she's going to get there at this point. And I think in the end, we were going to swim or sink with Carol Burnett.
This was probably your lowest moment, too. Look at her, despondent. And there's a despondent fellow.
Producers came to see us in Boston, And Bracco, particularly, as I remember, said, "What in God's name is going on here?" Words to that effect. Not to me, but I've heard this. He said, "My God, we're going to get killed if we don't do something here." So in essence, what he did was, now this is my view of it, he in essence said to Tom Moore, or indicated in some way, let Carol do her thing, because we're dying here. People wanted to see Carol more. They couldn't understand why she was playing, a star like that was playing a supporting role. So the dimensions of the play changed tremendously. Thank God, otherwise we'd have opened and closed in one day.
Lie down, I'll do your back, not stand up.
This period after that first preview was one of my favorite times because at that point all of us were working quite well together, Phil and Carol and I, and everybody felt they were really participating, and you can see it in the film because they make suggestions, it changes, and we do it. But you can also see Carol starting to get quite tired of having to cross Mark. But it's nice to be moving ahead. Thank you.
He's drunk!
George, in the closet, quick!
It was a physically demanding show for both Carol and I, and for everyone. But I mean, she and I had the brunt. And this change was a very fast change.
This scene always interested me because I never tired of watching it. They brought it off like a ballet.
They did.
It was so
hilarious.
Done, and
yeah,
they were so
very
good
funny.
at it.
And Dennis, poor Dennis. I used to tease him all the time. I said, "Does this mean we're going together? You don't love me anymore?" Dennis, I teased him. He was a good guy. Where was he?
It was marvelous. And of course it had audiences just crying with laughter.
When I could see that, I had no idea.
They need to give her more to do. Well, there's Madeline Ewing. Heidi and I invited her to Boston to see the show with the idea that she might invest in it. We took her to dinner that night before the show. Investors have to be schmoozed and wined and dined, and they have to be convinced that it's not an atrocious investment. Raising money for this one wasn't that hard.
Don't be a grouchy wouch, you just turn that frown upside down and sit on his lap. I love Daddy and Daddy loves me. Tickle, tickle, tickle.
Okay, try it.
Because frown upside down.
To a great extent, of course, because the process was to make the play right for Carol and Carol right for the play, I don't think we ever succeeded totally on either point. I don't think the play ever became the vehicle that Carol deserved and needed in order to be at her very best. And I don't think with all we did, we necessarily served the permanent needs of the play.
Just turn
Charlotte,
that
just
frown
cut it
down.
out.
Yeah.
Why don't you just do something like that?
Golly gee, Daddy, don't feel bad. Don't look
The
sad.
big strength of the show, and our security blanket, was Carol Burnett, that she was a big star. On the other hand, that was the downside. If Carol Burnett wasn't going to get into the role, if she wasn't going to get it, if she wasn't going to be good or good enough, that was going to unravel the whole enterprise because everything was predicated on her. She was the star. She was what people were coming to see. The big minefield that we had to be careful of stepping on was that Carol Burnett would somehow not be up to it, that whole thing would implode, that she would not feel comfortable in the role, that she would quit, or that she would get bad reviews and quit, or whatever. That was the danger. So early on in the Boston previews, where she was very tentative in the role and very unconfident in the role and unsure of herself, that caused, I think, a lot of anxieties among all of us.
Give us thanks. They're never wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Filmmakers Chris Hegedus and D.A. Pennebaker.
The Colonial Theater was just the greatest place to shoot for this film. First of all the dressing rooms were the same era as the play, so that was perfect. They were all still in the state from the 40s and 50s. And besides that, it had all these trap doors, which we used when we were making the film. It gave us the ability to go from the front of house to backstage without walking through the audience, basically.
It's like the Phantom of the Opera. I loved it.
15 minutes, please. 15.
This is for the first row.
This is a marvelous moment for me where the line is just a line, and she could have delivered it, it would have got a laugh. But look, she just keeps on top of it.
She's so...
She doesn't abandon it. And the audience, it gets funnier and funnier for that audience. It's like Jack Benny, you know? It's that thing of wringing everything out of nothing.
Does anyone know a prayer?
People don't give Ken credit for what he made. You know, no matter how great the actors are, no matter how big a star, no matter how much their tour de force performances, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because of the words they say and the production they're in.
I know what has to be fixing this. This is swell for first time here. This would not cut it in New York.
Kim was reacting very much in the way that he did with Crazy for You, which was massive rewrites, but because of the demands of the director and the cast.
But that's unusual, you say.
You know, he was rewriting things that didn't work. It wasn't that he was rewriting things that did work, and they didn't work. A lot of them didn't work for a variety of reasons. Some of which was the writing, some of which were the performers, some was the direction. Who knows? There were a lot of different reasons that he was put in that position.
Yeah.
He couldn't not do it.
No,
It wouldn't have made it better had he not.
No, absolutely not.
So,
And but the tensions of the situation were in fact based on the fact that everything was suddenly up for grabs.
we frequently play this game to spot the victim at the first rehearsal. The victim. It's a famous old theory. I think it was a Boris Aronson theory.
What was your theory?
Well, just every show had a victim, and the main thing is just to make sure that it wasn't you.
I think everybody was at one point.
Everybody probably was. You're right.
Yeah.
Do you encourage investors to
There's
come, or do you prefer...
Michael Riedel. He's one of these people you have in the theater where people are looking always at the negative aspects and the downside because they think that makes juicier copy. And they'll focus on any kind of conflict, any kind of negative issues. It's sad there are people like that in the world, and the theater seems to attract more than its share of them. But they exist, and he was a kind of dark shadow over the whole production.
Everybody knows! Nose? Did you say nose? Magnificent, my nose! You punk, you
There in Boston, Carol Burnett is very tentative in the role. People are worried. The play is not always funny in every instance either. Places where we thought laughs would come, they weren't. Ken started to get very alarmed. Now, of course, when something isn't funny or isn't working, what immediately happens in the theater is that everyone involved comes up with an idea of what's wrong. And the universal rule in the theater, every single time, without exception, I've never found an exception to this in my entire career, is that everyone is sure what's wrong, but it has nothing to do with what they did. It's always, if the playwright's not getting a laugh, the director hasn't staged it correctly. But according to the director, it either hasn't been written funny or the actors aren't delivering the performances that are going to get the laughs. The actors, of course, feel that the line isn't funny and the director hasn't staged it in the right way. And I've never heard anyone say, this isn't working because I'm not doing my job. I've never heard that once.
Does that surprise you?
It does a little bit. I would think it does. I would think people would say at some point, looking at it objectively, would look at it and say, you guys are all doing fantastic. This is my fault. Once, maybe?
So what we'll do tomorrow, we're going to do that, and then I'm going to do some notes, and I'm going to do some working notes, and we're putting a new ending into the show, which we're giving you the pages to tonight for you to see.
Tonight or tomorrow?
We're going to give it to you tonight so people can get from me.
All right, so start passing these out.
Ken's been working round the clock, getting them ready, and so has John.
Sure. One scene, but I want to do the long. I want to do the long scene because I want to do the whole new end. Hey.
Can you tell me what this new guy, who he is?
Yes, it's Frank. Actually, I did have another ending that I even wrote out, which I think was actually quite good, but it meant we had to hire another actor, which was I forgot all about this, Penny, till you just said that, is that there was a knock on the door, and the real Frank Capra shows up, and they throw him out because they think he's fake. And it was actually pretty funny, and we talked about it. I forgot about that. And we needed another actor, and they didn't want to hire another actor.
You have your opening out of town, and that's where you really take your temperature. That's where you find out if the patient has a chance to live or die. And then you go on from there. And then, of course, from then on, it's temperature along the way, but you don't get another one of those major points until you get to a New York audience, because a New York audience is quite different than a Boston audience. Quite different. People will accept things anywhere out of town that they will not accept in New York.
How far down the hill is the snowball in terms of opening night in Boston?
Pressing at our backs.
Yeah.
3/4 of the way down.
Yeah. Yep. Nipping at our heels.
Quite like they expected. It's a wonderful thing to be in Boston.
Good evening, everyone. This is your opening night.
One really lovely story that Carol told us when we were in the dressing room in Boston was that this was the same dressing room that she had been in during her very first out-of-town play experience. And she was very nostalgic about it, and she told a story about how she was a young newlywed with a child, and she had to leave the baby and go out of town and do the show, and it was her birthday, and she was feeling sorry for herself and everything, and she did the play and came off the stage and walked into the dressing room, and there was the baby in a little bassinet on the floor, and her husband had come up and surprised her.
When the reviews are good, it tends to embolden the creative team that they're doing everything right. And sometimes you need some negative reviews to shock them into a sense of reality and a sense of what all the work is that has to be done when you're out of town. Believe it or not, you don't necessarily want rave reviews out of town. They can be more destructive than helpful.
Well, you weren't unhappy then at this point, as I thought maybe you were.
No, sometimes you need the reviews to tell you you've got to really get to work now, and you've got to make changes. Because the creative team tends to get very invested in what they've done and very committed to it. And it's hard to get them to change.
Well, I think you did it already, George. Oh, I'm so sorry. We got carried away. I was such a fool.
Oh, we were both fools.
And now we're having a little fool. Oh, George.
You know, it's interesting because I know the actors being frustrated about their participation not being appreciated, particularly Phil and I guess Carol too. But the film actually shows that happening. It just shows it happening at a different place than they may have liked. It didn't happen so much in the first 2 weeks, but you see just about everything they suggest being incorporated in some way, perhaps modified, but put in.
So I left her a note.
The general public laughed at just about everything. The critics pretty much hated it all.
Strangest item has appeared in this week's variety.
This was bad. This never worked. Never worked. This moment here. We were embarrassed to do this part. But they wouldn't change it. Kept saying, this isn't funny. Once we opened for the press, and the critics then gave some wonderful reviews to the actors, and we had a lot of quotes to carry the show on. I had a glorious time because I felt satisfied and justified that my concern, was legitimate, and in a way I felt the burden was removed from my shoulders, so to speak. So now let's do the show, and we had a hell of a time.
Burnett and Bosco are impeccable.
Carol Burnett is, returning to Broadway and has a lot at stake. She wants to succeed. So there's a lot riding on it. for them, much more than for the producers. The producers aren't mentioned in the reviews. Nobody reviews them. They review the artists. So they have a lot at stake. You understand why there's so much narcissism in the theater, because they're constantly being judged and evaluated. And what they're being judged on, if you're an actor, is really who you are and what you project about yourself. So you can see that it fosters an interest in yourself. And if you're a director or a playwright, you're being judged on your work, your body of work, which is central to who you are. And it can make you, I think, very vulnerable and make you feel very anxious about how you're received.
In New York, the critics are spread out over a few nights.
They are?
Yeah.
I hope I don't know when it is. I don't want to know.
When I was doing Angels in America, somehow or another Tony Kushner found out when Frank Rich was coming.
Oh.
So,
I don't want to know who's
No, we don't tell
She's
anybody.
just being conventional there. I don't really think she gives two shits about the reviewers. She knows she's funny. Yeah. And it's kind of what you say, you know. I'm always petrified the first public performance, because it's the first time you have to go through it without being able to stop. And that's always a very chastening experience. I'm very anxious before the first public performance, not before opening night. No, by this time, no. The fat has already been in the fire. But before the first public performance, I'm always a nervous wreck. The first poem, but once that's over, I'm better.
I think it was Merrily where he said, how do you tell somebody to write better? How do you go about it? How do you do that?
I think the line was,
it's
how do you
very
tell
funny,
somebody
'cause
to
you're
write
like-
better? This is my favorite line in the movie.
Very funny.
I love it.
How do you tell someone to write better? Well, you can't. I mean, as, you know, we kept wanting funnier material from Ken. He was, you know, writing as funny as he could write. It's hard to instruct someone to write better. The Boston Globe review was just read to me. This is a meeting in my office. This is the producers about what the play's not funny enough, or we're going to get a play doctor. And they knew this dentist in New Jersey or something who could write jokes.
Filmmakers Chris Hegedus and D.A. Pennebaker.
You know, I kind of remember that Rocco was a little cool to us after that meeting, because somebody had leaked the story of the dentist joke writer, and I think maybe we were suspects.
Nobody wanted Ken to know about this, so you know, they kept wondering who leaked this story, and they really thought it was us, although they didn't really ever accuse us of doing it.
That's me.
That's right. we fixed on that.
And let's see who else. That is Elizabeth Williams. This is discussing how the play can be better, and we're talking about the idea of bringing in doctors to work in the play, which sometimes happens with productions.
And that was to go outside and hire a joke writer, because Ken is a brilliant structuralist.
If any scene seems a little like that wonderful Mel Brooks movie, The Producers, this one seems it to me as I watch it, because a dentist is going to come in to save a very expensive Broadway show.
Who writes the jokes? The dentist? He's a dentist? That's great.
The ones I read were pretty funny.
Oh, Mousy Lawrence's stuff is hilarious.
Don Taffner was in the room, and Hal Luftig. Hal had his own money in there from his investors.
Does it hurt more if the jokes are bad?
And Jack Viertel. Jack is always so well coiffed. Must be an art to be that well coiffed. The audience starts to think, is this guy or is this guy not a funny writer? Disaster. Disaster. The audience has got to be given every confidence. It's odd to say this, the jokes are the most important thing. The audience will forgive all kinds of structural stuff. They'll forgive the lack of characterizations. They'll forgive things not making sense. They won't forgive it not being funny.
Act one needs to be funnier and funny. I don't know what that. What do you say?
Jack was sort of the representative of the producers from an artistic